Tales of the Legion Project podcast, Justice League versus the Fatal Five. Hey everyone, this is Peter from the Daily Rios podcast.
And this is Eric from the Long Box Review podcast.
And you're listening to the third episode of Tales of the Legion Project, a special supplemental podcast to the ongoing Legion Project, where we get a chance to focus on Legion-adjacent comics, such as specials, annuals, miniseries, or, as in today's case, the Legion of Superheroes in other media. And that's why today's focus is on the DC animated movie, Justice League versus the Fatal Five. Are you excited, Eric?
I am very excited. This movie actually was kind of a bit of a surprise to me. Somehow I kind of lost track because I normally keep track of the animated movies that DC is putting out, and I, for some reason, either that or I'm developing dementia and just totally wiped it out of my head. I did not realize that they were doing a movie featuring the Legion, or at least in part, but certainly elements of the 31st century DC universe here. So when I first heard about this, it was shortly before the movie was released, and taking the Justice League, the Bruce Timm Justice League, and putting them up against the Fatal Five, my favorite Legion villain group. I mean, I'm very excited to talk about this.
Nice. It had its world premiere at WonderCon in Anaheim on March 29th of this year, 2019. It was released on digital shortly thereafter, and then it was finally released on DVD in April. But I have to imagine you and I both watched it on the DCU app, DC Universe app, correct?
I did, yeah. It was the first time that I've ever watched one of their movies. No, I'm sorry, it was the second time. I watched the one of the Superman movies that they previously released. But I watched the movie the first time that way through the DC Universe app. I have since actually gone back and bought the Blu-ray because for some reason I like to have physical media of this stuff, and I have all of the DC animated movies. The main movies. I won't count like compilation type stuff from the very beginning. That I don't even know how many years ago that it's been since they started this, but I have all those in DVD and now Blu-ray because apparently they're not releasing some of these newer movies on DVD anymore.
This was the 34th or something they mentioned. So you have all those.
Was it really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And I have a theory about all those movies that I'm sure will come up in our conversation, because I always have theories. Right?
I was going to say, I can't wait to hear this.
All right, so this was directed by Sam Liu, who has a ton of the other movies in his biography, in his bio list. Teen Titans Judas Contract, Justice League versus the Teen Titans, the Gods and Monsters stuff, Killing Joke, Gotham by Gaslight, Batman Year One, All-Star Superman, etc., etc. And he co-directed with Lauren Montgomery the Justice League Crisis on Two Earths and Batman Year One. He's also done some of the Marvel animated movies, and apparently he won a Daytime Emmy Award for his work on the Batman series from 2006, The Batman.
Huh. I didn't realize he had done some Marvel stuff as well.
Just a few. I think one of them was Planet Hulk and a Thor one. This movie is also written by Eric Carrasca, who is one of the main writers on the Supergirl TV series. And he was partnered with Jim Krieg and Alan Burnett. And if you know that name, I mean, Alan Burnett apparently has been around behind the scenes with all of these DC animated movies and cartoons, going all the way back to one of the Super Friends cartoons from the 80s. So his name, yeah, I mean, when you look at his checklist, woo, he's just everywhere. Not only in the DC universe, but other cartoons as well. He's written some comics here and there as well. So,
well, I recognize his name certainly because it's flashed up on the credits for a lot of these movies. But yeah, I didn't realize he had that much of a connection, I guess.
And I didn't really go. I don't really go too deep with some of these creators sometimes because I don't know, for one reason or another. But I just looked it up. I'm sure there's other people who have more experience and a little more of an expert when it comes to the names behind the scenes on these movies. But I did look him up, and it just kept going and going and going and going. I'm like, all right, he clearly knows his stuff.
So does that make him the Hoppy the Marvel Bunny in the DC universe? It keeps going and going.
Keeps going and going. Let's see. You have a cast list. We should talk about some of the big names here. What do you have for your cast list here?
So I put it. I reorganized it from the official list because this movie features certain characters, and so I kind of organized it that way. And so we have Diane Guerrero as Jessica Cruz, Green Lantern Jessica Cruz, and Elias Gabel as Thomas Starboy, as we come to find out who he is. George Newbern returns as Superman, as does Kevin Conroy as Batman, and Susan Eisenberg as Wonder Woman. So we get Justice League Unlimited cast members returning as those characters, which was really nice. And as far as the villains, we have Peter Jessup as Thorok, Tom Kenny as Bloodsport. I think this is probably in. No, I don't know why I have it in this order because I have Bloodsport in between. But Matthew Yang King as the Persuader, and Sumili Montano as Emerald Empress, Philip Anthony Rodriguez as Mono, Daniela Bobadilla, I'm not sure, as Miss Martian, Kevin Michael Richardson as Mr. Terrific, Noel Fisher as Brainiac 5, Tara Strong, which is a name I think a lot of us recognize in the animated world as a voice actor, as Saturn Girl. And finally, I don't know if you knew this, Peter, but Bruce Timm has some credits here as well, as Two-Face and the grunts of Validus, I suppose. So they got Bruce Timm doing a little bit of work there, as he does that pretty commonly, I think, in the stuff that he helps produce.
Right. I mean, you get your voice on there. It's something silly, and it probably keeps the cost down somewhere along the way.
Well, and he probably gets residuals too.
Yeah. You might recognize Diane Guerrero's name. She is currently playing Crazy Jane on the Doom Patrol series on the DC
okay.
app.
Yes. All right.
And the actor who is voicing Starboy, I didn't know this. I just saw it when I looked it up. He is he's a character on Game of Thrones for 2 seasons. He's one of the Dothraki that belongs to Dany. That's one of her blood riders.
Okay.
In the show. So I'm currently watching that right now. So the 2nd season. So I was like, oh, that's him. Okay, that's cool. Kevin Michael Richardson. He was the Joker on the Batman series from 2005-2008. He does a bunch of voices on Young Justice, Martian Manhunter, Jon Stewart, Dr. Fate. He's Trigon in various Teen Titans cartoon appearances. and he was Kilowog on the Green Lantern animated series and in this movie as well.
Okay.
So it's nice to get a couple, get someone to reprise their role. Hearing those three, though, the big three, Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, that's just, Batman obviously Kevin Conroy going all the way back from the animated series. But just hearing those three again, I thought, and I'm sure we'll talk about the whole idea of putting it in that continuity. That was kind of like coming home again.
I was just going to say that phrase. Exactly. Yeah. I think those three are definitely they are the trinity of, I think, the animated movie universe as well.
Right. Okay, so before we get into the discussion, how about you have a synopsis that you pulled? Why don't you just read that for anybody who hasn't seen it?
Okay, so this is what is referred to as the official synopsis. I'm not sure what makes it official, but anyway, Justice League versus the Fatal Five finds the fate of the Earth hanging in the balance when the Justice League faces a powerful new threat, the Fatal Five. Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman seek answers as the time-traveling trio of Mono, Persuader, and Theric terrorize Metropolis in search of budding Green Lantern Jessica Cruz. With her unwilling help, they aim to free remaining Fatal Five members Emerald Empress and Validus to carry out their sinister plan. But the Justice League has also discovered an ally from another time in the peculiar Starboy, brimming with volatile power. Could he be the key to thwarting the Fatal Five? An epic battle against ultimate evil awaits. Somebody had fun writing that.
It's good to be the person who has to write the copy, right? So the way we're going to talk about this is we're going to try to focus on some of the Legion aspects in this cartoon, in this movie. And as a way to help that, both Eric and I watched some of their previous appearances within the DC animated universe. So we watched an episode from Superman the Animated Series called New Kids in Town, which is Season 3, Episode 3, all the way back from October of 1998, which I have to assume is when the Legion first appeared on a cartoon, I imagine. The other one that we watched is from Justice League Unlimited, Far From Home, which is from Season 3, Episode 10, also featuring members of the Legion. And we're not going to go super in-depth on those, but we may incorporate them into the larger conversation as a way to kind of see where some of these characters have come from, as a way to see how the Legion is showcased in the animated universe, both in this movie and elsewhere, fully understanding that they had their own series, but that's kind of, we're not going to focus on that because that really was its own thing. This is just their few appearances and then this movie. And, we may bounce around a bunch here, but just to give you an idea of what kind of research we did for the movie. So before we do any of that, though, we should just give our general thoughts about Justice League versus the Fatal Five. What did we think? What kind of stuff did we take from it? Eric, why don't you start us off with that?
Well, anytime I see the Legion in an episode of something, I'm always very open to it and wanting it to be great. And I wouldn't say I was disappointed at all in terms of what we have on the screen, because there's not a lot of really Legion in it. There's some elements to it. There's some characters, but it wasn't a true Legion of Superheroes extravaganza. And not that this movie wasn't billed as that, but I was kind of hoping going into it that we'd have a little bit more. There's that one scene that maybe we'll talk about where we see the 31st century, but really the focus is on Starboy and his relationship, or his mission and his developing relationship with this new Green Lantern, Jessica Cruz. And that's the part that I really latched onto in this movie, and I really enjoyed, was these two, and for lack of a better word, broken people in the ways that they are, how they are relying on each other and depending on each other, and helping each other through their particular issues, while at the same time fighting this group, the Fatal Five, and really the Justice League. While they have top billing, Justice League versus the Fatal Five, I really thought of them as more supporting characters in this movie, and I really liked that particular take on introducing basically two new characters in the DC animated universe, and allowing them to breathe, I guess, in this movie.
Yeah, and two characters that obviously don't get a lot of spotlight. You could even put a third one in there if you include Miss Martian.
True, yeah.
And obviously she has had a lot of play in the Young Justice cartoon, but in many ways it feels like she's coming up to the big leagues here. Mm-hmm. So we've seen her before. One of my notes here was it felt like there were a lot of stories that either sometimes worked well together and sometimes almost were running a little side by side without ever coming together. As you mentioned, Starboy's story, the whole reason why he's coming back to the 21st century, Jessica's story, and then their two stories combining. Miss Martian and her role within the larger Justice League, and then how she relates to the conflict as well. And then the whole Fatal Five stuff, and then the whole Justice League versus the Fatal Five stuff, and then this weird tangent off into Oa. I wrote down here, I thought this movie had a lot of plot. It had plot and plot development, not necessarily depth, just a lot of things happening. But I felt like the action side of it, they relied a lot on the action side of it, and some of that I got kind of bored with. It was almost like one too many fights with the Fatal Five.
Yeah, I thought the same thing.
Right? So, and they all kind of had a point, but I mean, if you counted them up, I mean, you had, first of all, you have the opening fight that brings them back to our time. You have the fight where they're broken out of the bubble where Superman gets slashed. You have the fight in the parking lot. Mm-hmm. You have the whole thing with the bombs, the sequence with the bombs. Not necessarily a fight, but it's still an action sequence of sorts. You have the fight when they first get to Oa. I guess then it's just the final one then. Mm. So you put all those together and it's like, woo! That's a lot of action, but I'm not necessarily sure it was all... I wasn't as interested in all of them, I guess. Yeah.
Well, considering this movie has a runtime of 77 minutes, I wonder how many of those minutes was taken up by all these fight scenes.
Yeah.
As opposed to, character development or dialogue between, just exposition and stuff like that. But I imagine a good chunk of that was all these fight scenes.
Right. Well, let's talk about the Fatal Five. You said they are your favorite, one of or your favorite Legion villains. They obviously get title billing. So why don't we talk about the Fatal Five and what you thought in this movie, and we can always, as I said before, we can connect back to those other episodes if we want to.
Mm-hmm. Well, so you have the classic Fatal Five team of Tharok, Persuader, Mono, Emerald Empress, and Validus. And they are my favorite Legion villain group, and always have been since their first appearance way back in I forget the issues, but in Adventure Comics, this is the classic storyline in which Feral Lad gives up his life to save the universe from the Sun Eater. The Fatal Five are brought together with the Legion to help battle that, and it's the Legion's fault that the Fatal Five even exist, which I always thought was a nice bit of irony. But I don't know, just these characters in general, they're so weird. They're like the Legion in miniature, because they all have a particular ability that is their main power set, I guess, so to speak. But they're all really kind of weird, and why are they together? It doesn't make any sense that they're together. It just but they are, and they continue to stay together. It never seems, if you think about it logically, these characters should not be together, because you have the very powerfully what do I want to say? A powerful personality in Emerald Empress and Tharok, and you would think that those two would not work well together. And then you have Persuader, who's kind of like the muscle, but he has this atomic axe that can slice through anything. Mono has this weird hand-destroying ability, not hand-destroying, but a disintegration thing where he touches something and it disintegrates it. And Validus is just a big monster with mental lightning. And Emerald Empress, of course, has the Emerald Eye of Ekron, which is this sometimes all-powerful weapon and sometimes not. It's been weirdly portrayed over the years. So that's kind of the background or my perception of these characters from the comics. And so now we get to how they're portrayed in this movie, and what an interesting change they made to the relationships of these characters. Mm-hmm. Traditionally, Tharok is the leader of this group.
That's what I thought. Yeah,
and he's not in this. He's a vocal dissident in some ways in this, but he goes along with Emerald Empress. No, Mono's. I guess it's kind of the same, because in this rendition, Mono and Emerald Empress are an item. They're a couple, and that was really weird. Coming from all the years I've been reading about these characters, I don't think I've ever read anything, and I can't say that I read every appearance of the Fatal Five, but I've never encountered these characters ever hooking up with one another in any way. And to see Mono being the leader, essentially, of this or the leader in this story, but he's really doing the bidding of Emerald Empress, so really she's the leader, but that comes in later in the movie. That was like I said, a very interesting change, and I liked it. I thought it brought some depth to the characters. Like I said before, there's no reason why these characters should stay together. Right. And yet in this movie, we're given, at least for some of them, a reason why they are together. And I really like that. It made me appreciate the characters more.
What did you think of the way they're portrayed, in the sense of, number one, they all can fly, and number two, they all seem to have super strength?
Yeah. Yeah, because traditionally it's Validus, just because he's huge, he has super strength. The Persuader has always been portrayed as having some super strength. But yeah, it was interesting. The fact that everybody can fly, I think, is just a lazy shortcut that they've been using. I think in a lot of different animated shows, movies, and television series, just because it's easy to do, I guess.
It's easy to get them from one place to the other.
Exactly, yeah.
And they can also stand up. When you have someone like Superman and Wonder Woman, you got to make them stand up against them in a way. Yeah. It took a little while as I was watching it, as I was watching that aspect, and I was thinking, okay, Should they really be giving Wonder Woman that much of a...
I had the same thought. Yes.
Yeah.
That was weird.
Yeah. And I read an interview somewhere that said for a team named Fatal 5, they didn't do a lot of fataling, killing, and they weren't 5 of them until the end.
Yeah. That was a bit weird. Although, sure, there's not, it's an animated movie. Not that I want to see, because my big complaint about these more recent DC animated movies is that they're going a little darker than they have in the past, and not a change that I'm actually all that receptive of. So this was a nice change of pace, but they were very threatening. They were the threatening 5. It was, you mentioned the bomb sequence earlier, because that's pretty,
villainous.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. I mean, that was pretty evil of them to do, just to get a means to an end.
And they did, as I said, they gutted Superman. I mean, it was interesting seeing that aspect against the designs of Justice League and Justice League Unlimited. We saw quote unquote nudity. There was language. There was violence. People did die. People got stabbed and disintegrated by Mono. Superman got hurt to a level that it's not like it hasn't ever been there before, but certainly with the language, they can't do much when it's on regular TV. But I thought it upped the ante a lot on some of that stuff, and seeing it in this universe was kind of interesting. But again, if you're gonna have characters like this, something's got to happen.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and yeah, I completely forgot about that. The bunker scene. I call it the bunker. Mm-hmm. Towards the end of the movie, that was just brutal. Yeah. I mean, that's exactly where they earned their Fatal 5 moniker, because what they did to those poor soldiers is, right. I was actually kind of turned off by that.
And on some level, though, do you think it's earned? I just thought of this now. Do you think it's earned a little bit because Jessica Cruz's story, her origin, which is pulled from the comics, where it's very violent, and she has friends that she's going out camping with, and then 2 of them get shot because they come up upon some killers or whatever. So her origin is born out of trauma and tragedy, and we're seeing that here as well, where these characters, these villains, they're not just looking for money and whatever. I mean, they're going out of their way to kill people, and I wondered if that was a way to kind of bring Jessica to violence, to trauma, and be able to overcome her own past. Because it made me wonder why she was so hesitant to be a hero. They don't really kind of explain beyond just showing you that she has a chip on her shoulder, she has some past trauma, and if you're going to go into the superhero world, it's going to be traumatic. So I wonder if maybe they thought by showcasing that, you're giving her a way to become a stronger person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's how I read it. But I agree with you. Her raison d'etre. I wasn't quite sure that, it's very easy to, see why she is the way she is because of the trauma she experienced. But then you couple that with, she has a Green Lantern ring, and you only get a Green Lantern ring, at least, these days, the Jeff Johns and later era, if you can overcome great fear, you can be selected as a Green Lantern. Where did she do that? Because all we see is that she is running from this trauma. She's avoiding it. I mean, she's trying to deal with it, but really what we're shown is that she's not being successful at it. So why is she a Green Lantern? It's just an odd thing, and I wonder if there was some more to this movie that they just simply cut out.
And I guess in a way, her relationship with Starboy is the point too, because she's able to channel what she's going through in her therapy sessions to him, and then as a way come to terms with what she's going through. Maybe not solve it, obviously, but at least maybe come to terms with it.
Well, that's what I was speaking to earlier as to why I like this movie more so than other elements, is that she's very much an introvert in a lot of different ways of the sense of that word. And it's only when she can help someone else going through a trauma, so to speak. Starboy's trauma is that his mind is not right. It's broken, like I said, and it's only when she can externalize her own issues, I guess, and help another person that she is able to start dealing with her own trauma, and not avoid it, and to confront it, and to get past it. Or at least it's suggested that she can get past it now.
I like the little bit of connection when she's talking to the therapist, and the therapist is like, well, did you try your mantra? And she's like, no. And then at the end of the movie, she says the Green Lantern oath, the Green Lantern mantra, if you will. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing. And then finally, that's when she's able to sort of access the full power of her ring, because she starts to create constructs, more detailed constructs. She really ups her power when she goes up against the Fatal Five at that aspect. So I sort of thought it was going to happen that way. When I heard the word mantra, I was like, oh, she probably is going to say the oath, and that's the thing that's going to finally push her over the edge. And that's sort of what happened.
Yeah, but that was still a cool scene when she did.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I really liked it.
So what'd you think of Starboy, in not only in the sense of Starboy, the Legion character, and we've already sort of talked about or touched on his relationship with Jessica, but just as the choice for this story, as the bridge between the 31st century and the 21st century, other than the obvious ending, which when we got to the ending, I was like, okay, well, that's why you use Starboy.
Yeah,
but, do you? Let's go a little bit more with Starboy. What did you think?
Well, so the first thing I thought of was this seems very familiar, because it draws heavily on the Starman character that appeared in the comic JSA. I think it's around 2007-ish. That led to the Lightning Saga story that reintroduced the 1980s Legion into DC continuity. And so, it's like, well, of course it's going to be Starboy, because they're drawing from that storyline where he came back and did all these things, and his mind was not right, and all that stuff. So it wasn't I guess a surprise to me that they focused on him as opposed to somebody else. Mostly because that's what the DC animated movies are doing these days. In the last few years, they instead of drawing on or instead of creating new material, although I'm kind of going to contradict myself because this is somewhat new material, they basically adapt storylines from existing comics into movies. This one is, like I said, not so much that, but it is drawing on other elements, and a lot of it is, this is something I was going to point out anyway, there's a lot of Jeff Johns love in this movie. Like I said, you have the Starboy, Starman thing from JSA. You have Miss Martian from his Teen Titans run, Jessica Cruz, Mr. Terrific, also from the JSA run. He helped develop that character. So there's a lot of elements from stuff that he worked on or created in this particular movie. So that it's kind of a mishmash of things. But I don't know. Beyond that, I don't know that Starboy, other than like you said, it makes total sense why he is being used in this movie based on what happens in the end. I don't know that I have anything else to really say about him as kind of like the bridge. What was your take on that?
I mean, outside of just being a companion character for Jessica too, which we've already sort of talked about. I guess this is where the story kind of falls apart for me because, like you said, it's not fair to say, I want more Legion. Well, that's not what the story was.
Right.
But you did say Fatal Five, and that is the Legion. Even though there's evidence, I mean, there is precedence of the Fatal Five being in the DC universe without the Legion. I think back during the Jeff Loeb, Ed McGuinness Superman run, there was, it was like during Our Worlds at War, I think the Fatal Five was brought to the 20th century for some reason, and the Legion wasn't involved. I don't know. So that's the part that I kind of struggled with is like, okay, they're coming back, and the whole reason why they're coming back in time I thought was forced as well.
Yeah.
I thought that was a shoddy excuse. Let's stick them in the past? What? But I guess the notion of there not being any Green Lanterns in the 31st century, that is a Legion concept. I mean, they're, maybe not to the degree that they're wiped out completely, but I don't know. Some of it just kind of, it didn't hold for me too well. And then I started to play the game of, what other stories could we have had with this setup, using Starboy, using even Jessica? I think we could have gotten different stories. And I know you're not supposed to play that game this early, but like you mentioned the Lightning Saga. Why couldn't we have had the Lightning Saga?
Yeah.
You could have easily said Flash is missing, right? And if you didn't want to do it with Flash, maybe some other character. The other storyline that I wish they might have touched on, and still use this same kind of setup is you already used Jessica's comic book origin story to a degree. Well, you could have used that as a way for this to be a sequel to Crisis on Two Earths, the other animated universe story. You could have brought back the Crime Syndicate, which is basically following what happened with her in the New 52 comics. I don't know how you rope Starboy into all that, but, whatever. It's not my job to figure that out. I don't know. So, yeah, I liked his portrayal. I liked what they did with him at the end. I really liked the use of going into his mind to see the Legionnaires, to see where the Fatal Five came from, because it gave us a chance, compared to the other episodes that we watched, to see the Legion, to see them portrayed more than they were before, outside of their own series. Not just 3 of them, not just pictures of them or statues of them, and not just like small fights. Like you really got to see them do something, and I kind of like that, But is that really connected to the larger story? Sort of not. So, yeah, including Starboy, including the Legion, it's where I kind of get a little lost in this story, which is weird because we're talking about the Legion.
Yeah. It's almost like they wanted to use, for some reason, use the Fatal Five, so we have to have some connection to the future. And Starboy's here. I don't know. Yeah, it's all very weirdly kind of. It feels weirdly thrown together. It's like a bunch of things I threw at the wall. It's like these kind of all landed together, so let's use those.
And if you think of, so one of the background things was that this animated movie was supposed to be in the style of Crisis on Two Earths. They were supposed to use that animated style, but Bruce Timm and other people felt that it would connect. It would look a little too much like what's going on in the other DC animated movies that are focusing more on like the New 52 style.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why they said, okay, we'll go back to the old models. We already had everything recorded voice-wise. We knew that we already had Kevin Conroy and the other two. So let's just go back to the DC animated style. And I don't know how they exactly do that, but the Fatal Five were in a Justice League animated movie, so I have to imagine it's not that much of a stretch to use them again. And maybe that's why the choices were there. Well, no, I get they would have already had the story done by then. So, or maybe that's why it made it easier to go back to that style. I don't know. I don't know if they recycle cells or recycle whatever, not cells, but models, designs. What did you think of the Fatal Five in compared to their episode in Justice League Unlimited, the Far From Home with Supergirl? What did you think of that?
Well, they're more, or their appearance in that episode is that's a little more traditional. I guess there's a lot of it was comparing their appearance there to what I saw in the movie, and so you see Tharok being the guy in charge. I did like Emerald Empress. I thought Emerald Empress had a little bit more to do in that Justice League Unlimited episode,
right,
than she actually did in this movie, and I actually liked her portrayal, the way the voice actor did or portrayed that character, I guess. She was kind of delightfully sinister in that episode. And then Mono was basically window dressing in that episode, which is, comparatively, it's like day and night with him in the movie. So, they're just, like I said, they came across as kind of the traditional Fatal Five that I'm familiar with, and they were dispatched, pretty easily in that episode. So it's like, what about you? What is your comparison thoughts on the groups?
I think what's interesting is that they're used almost the same way. Like in the Justice League Unlimited episode, it's a way to bring Supergirl into a new sort of status quo, and in the movie, it's a way to bring Jessica Cruz into a new status quo. So they almost were used the same way or for the same purpose, to put them up against one of our heroes that is going through some kind of momentary identity crisis, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
So in that aspect, they almost seem secondary. And I guess that's kind of what I felt about the movie too. They felt secondary very much. But I also don't know how they would have, if it truly was a Justice League versus the Fatal Five movie, how interesting would that have been, So I think I'm kind of caught in a this is what we got, okay, but I can't think of anything better that has all the same characters. Design-wise, too, I thought they both design-wise, though, were okay. I think the one thing that kind of confuses me, or no, I understand it, is when they make Validus a robot. In the Justice League Animated, Supergirl punches him, and he's clearly a robot.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas I think in the movie, he feels a little more organic.
Mm-hmm.
I get it. If they're the only way to defeat that big of a creature in the cartoon is by making him a robot and punching a hole in him, or deactivating him, and you're not going to kill him. But he can't be so much of a mortal threat that he's killing the heroes. He's just sort of like a big bumbling Hulk character.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I thought the stories, in fact, I thought all three, the Superman episode, the Justice League episode, and this movie, eerily, whenever they introduced the Legion, they all started the same way. Where somebody was running through a hallway or going to something like a portal or a time bubble, and then they managed to throw themselves back into our time. They all started that way.
They did. You're
that?
right. Yeah.
Yeah. Because in the Superman animated series, Brainiac is looking for some kind of temporal portal. He finds it in a room, and then there's Legionnaires that chase after him, and they get zapped back in time. In the Justice League Unlimited cartoon, Brainy and Saturn Girl are... what happens? Brainy and Bouncing Boy are being chased by the Fatal Five back to the rocket ship headquarters, their old headquarters. They're coming through a hallway. They break into a room. There's a time bubble there. They go back they go back and they get someone from our time. Green Arrow, Green Lantern, and Supergirl. And then they fight the Fatal Five. And then in the movie, it's the same way. This is the one where they're Brainy and Saturn Girl are what happened? What I forgot. So the Fatal Five are trying to go to the time bubble, I think. Is that what it is? Or can't remember. Yeah. And Brainy tries to rig it, and they're fighting through a hallway, and then they break into the room, and then Starboy is the one that goes back in time. So it's like oddly all the same.
Mm-hmm.
So that was an interesting parallel watching all three of them do that. Like that was our introduction into the Legion, that they can't handle their time machines.
You'd think that the 31st century officials would, put some sort of restrictions on this.
Yeah, I think.
That parallelism that you're talking about, it's interesting because I think with the Superman animated episode, we get the characters of Saturn Girl, Cosmic Boy, and Chameleon Boy. So those are our Legionnaires that appear primarily. And in going to the Justice League Unlimited, there are at least visual recurrences, like you mentioned the old rocket ship clubhouse. So that appears in both.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that Chameleon Boy looks is very similar to his dual appearances in these episodes. Mm-hmm. And considering that there's only 6, 7, 8 year difference between those two episodes, and the fact that I think Justice League and Justice League Unlimited did a really good job of continuing things that were developed in the Batman series and the Superman series, it makes sense that they would do some callbacks in this movie. So because it involves some of the same people, Bruce Timm primarily, the Justice League characters, and so I could see why they would do that from a production perspective, and maybe even think that, hey, we're throwing this callback in for fans of these shows that from before, but all it really does for me and I think for you is just like, why are we seeing these repeats of plot elements in this
right.
movie? It's just like, you couldn't have come up with something better?
I mean, I liked in the movie, in the Fatal Five movie, that they are used. You actually see them a little more engaged in battle in Starboy's mind. I mean, they used Tyrock. That's insane.
Yeah.
It's not just, Saturn Girl, Brainiac 5. They used Tyrock. I was like, it's Tyrock. That's great. The Legion appearances outside of their series, and this is sort of the reason why I wanted to do this and go back and watch them, is because I just wanted to see how they handled it. And if we go into, let's go into Superman animated a little bit. It's clearly a riff on the first time Superboy meets the Legion.
Mm-hmm.
Because you have a trinity. It's not the exact trinity, but it's Saturn Girl, Cosmic Boy, and Chameleon Boy, which you can say, okay, Chameleon Boy's power is interesting in a cartoon.
Mm-hmm.
Do we really need Lightning Lad where it's just more energy stuff, you know?
Right.
So I totally get that. Plus he has humor involved. And it's a whole riff on that Silver Age story. So I like that, you know, like I liked the way they looked. I liked the story that they developed, where Brainiac 5 was coming back to kill a young Clark Kent.
Brainiac.
We got to... What's that?
Brainiac, not Brainiac 5.
Oh, sorry, Brainiac. Yeah, Brainiac. Not Brainiac. That would be bad. And then you got to see some of the Legion, right? Like you got to see the rocket ship. That was their headquarters at that time. You got to see other members. And it was this weird mix of Silver Age and post-Zero Hour stuff. Because they had Andromeda.
Right.
And Kid Quantum. Which was like, what?
Yeah, that was weird.
Yeah, and not to mention they had the L symbols on their belts. Like, that's a very post-Zero Hour thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, but it was good. Like, it was like, oh, look, there's the Legion, right? Like, I felt like there was, like, a way to go. If they were ever going to develop a series, they could have spun it right out of there.
Mm-hmm.
What'd you think of that Superman episode?
Well, mostly it was because of the Legion appearance and that little flash of the Legionnaires showing up that really made that episode for me. You know, like you said, it was a new take on his encountering the Legion, although he doesn't remember it by the end.
Right.
But he does learn to. There are certain things that happen in the episode where he carries on so that he does become Superman as they told him he would. You know, the him using glasses, that's where the whole glasses thing comes in. And he, I don't know, Clark seems to have a better sense of his role going forward. And he's clearly on the path of becoming Superman.
Yeah, oddly enough, it almost is repeating the theme of using the Legion to better your heroes.
Mm-hmm.
Because they say throughout all of the different episodes that... So like in this one, they say that they're inspired by Superman. And in the Fatal Five movie, they say that they were inspired by the ideals of the Justice League.
Mm-hmm.
But yet in some kind of weird timey-wimey thing, they are the ones that have gone back and helped to better certain characters as well. Because he, in the Superman episode, as he's fighting Brainiac, he kind of comes to grips with his power a little bit. Or at least his strength and what he can do. Because he's punked quite a lot, Clark Kent. You could tell he's not... okay, so he can play basketball and he can run fast and he can kick something. But when Brainiac shows up, Brainiac wipes the floor with him. But then at the end, when he sees his parents getting hurt and the other Legionnaire members, he finally is like, no, you know, he destroys some tractors. He punches Brainiac. Like, he gets a little more into his body. And in a weird way, that was because of the Legion.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the same thing they did with Jessica Cruz. And it's the same thing they did with Supergirl.
Yeah. And
so that's kind of
a slightly different way, but yeah.
Yeah, so it's interesting that they keep using those same tropes or whatever.
Now, if only DC Comics would realize the how important the Legion is to the larger DC universe, as you have just outlined. You know, forget the JSA as the superheroes that train young heroes. I mean, the Legion is the perfect training facility, I guess.
Right. Well, if we go to do you have anything else for the Superman episode?
Just this has nothing to do with the Legion, but I appreciated the Star Wars and Dukes of Hazzard references. in it, because I was trying to place the time
Yeah.
in which, I was trying to place it and also verify that they got it right, because one of the characters makes a Darth Vader reference to in relation to Brainiac, and later I think Martha Kent makes a reference to Dukes of Hazzard is on or whatever, and so it puts it in 1979, so that makes sense. And considering that the episode started with, I think they flashed the year for where the Legion was, which was 2979, and the whole 1,000-year difference, that makes perfect sense. I just appreciated it.
Oh. See, I was thinking it was the 80s, but that totally makes sense now.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. I was wondering why it was 2979. I was like, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Okay. I caught the references. I did. Okay. Yeah, you're right. Good catch. I liked how they used Chameleon Boy's powers so that it was a visual thing. His antenna would turn into like the horns of the Minotaur,
Mm-hmm.
or one of them turned into Superman's S-curl, or turned back from the S-curl into an antenna. So I like that visual stuff. That was interesting.
And did you notice, speaking of Chameleon Boy, so this is going back to the Justice League Unlimited episode, he turns into the same lizard creature that he was in the Superman episode.
Yeah.
I thought that was a nice connection there.
Yeah. I mean, visually, he also looks the same even in the Fatal Five movie, too.
Mm-hmm.
The little that we see him with that weird green and yellow costume.
Yeah.
So the Justice League Unlimited episode, Far From Home, as we said, this is more of a Supergirl story based on with the Legion as kind of like a backdrop. I almost felt like if the Superman episode was the Silver Age first appearance of the Legion of Superheroes, this one kind of felt like, especially because you're using the Fatal Five, it felt like it was that Pharaoh Lad story that you mentioned, where Supergirl's sort of in the place of Pharaoh Lad.
Yeah.
The Fatal Five have come together. It's not so much of a tragedy where there's a Sun Eater and all that involved, but she quote unquote dies. There's this but she doesn't really. I don't know. I thought loosely I could make a connection that way.
No, I thought the same thing, especially since they at one point they go through a Hall of Heroes type thing, mm-hmm. and we see a statue of Pharaoh Lad. Now, this is not a fallen Hall of Heroes, but Pharaoh Lad is prominently displayed there, and also his brother. I thought was weird, but so for those of us who know, it is very much a callback to that story,
right? And they use continuity, right? Even though we see the rocket ship in the beginning of that episode, that's their old headquarters. You can tell by the dust, and they even say something about, we can hide away here, they'll never find us, their new headquarters. We see their new headquarters later. So I thought that was a little bit of a nice continuity nod from their Superman appearance. And in a way, you could kind of see this as them being a little older, obviously, and it would make sense that nobody would know who they are because they mind wiped Superman's brain
mm-hmm.
from the Superman episode. So it kind of totally makes sense. Like, I was like right with it. I was like, yep, this all kind of makes sense. Even if the characters look a little different, the Legionnaires always look different depending on what era you're in. So I kind of dug that. And then you got to see a bunch more, you got to see Block, which was fun. Timberwolf, Shadowlass, but they didn't really fight in the way that they do in the Fatal Five movie. I think one of the things I really liked from the Unlimited episode was the way they did Bouncing Boy. They didn't just turn him into a big ball. They made him bounce, but he seemed almost like he had great agility, so that he could tumble and roll and throw himself off a wall, but only a few times did he really turn into something.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate that as well. It's very different than how he is portrayed in the Legion cartoon itself, which I'm sure we'll get to eventually.
Okay. Well, here's how I connect those two to the movie, and why when Bruce Timm says he considers it canon, I kind of can see it. So you have the Fatal Five in the Unlimited episode, but the only Legionnaires they come across are Supergirl, Green Arrow, and Green Lantern. Green Lantern or John Stewart Green Lantern, I should say. In the Fatal Five movie, he's off-world. And I feel like with the characters that are brought back, Starboy being, that character, and the three Fatal Five, it kind of makes sense that nobody would know each other in the strictest sense. Outside of maybe Green Arrow, John Stewart saying, oh, let me log the mission in, and we fought these characters, But with that sort of, by not having John Stewart there, or Green Arrow, or Supergirl, I feel like, yeah, it makes sense that this could still be in canon. Certainly the development of not having Martian Manhunter, but having Miss Martian, so it shows that it's a little bit later in time.
Mm-hmm.
That was kind of my only proof of evidence that I could sort of go, okay, it's not perfect, but it kind of makes sense. So that's I personally think all of the DC animated movies are in continuity with each other in a weird sort of headcanon way.
Mm-hmm.
They certainly went about to try to make that happen when they created the Flashpoint movie, and then everything after that was a certain version. But even the earliest ones, like Doomsday and whatever the earliest movies were, I was like, there is a kind of weird progression going on. It's not linear, but it's not necessarily always contradicting either.
Right.
So, in my big headcanon of all this stuff, I want it to make sense, so I try to make it make sense.
I don't think we can help ourselves. We want to do that.
Yeah.
Do we want to talk about the specific ending? I have just one little thought about that.
Sure.
And I didn't mention this earlier, but I did mention the Feral Lad story, but so that was clearly on my mind as I was taking these notes. But I thought this movie was, in my notes I said this is an odd retelling of that original adventure and Feral Lad's sacrifice, because we get Starboy's sacrifice in a sense. But it also reminded me of, and I forget which one this situation appeared in, or maybe they were playing off of each other. I'm not sure. But isn't there some stories in like DC 1 Million or All-Star Superman where Superman is living in the sun?
DC 1 Million, yeah.
Yeah, and I think there's something else in All-Star Superman where he goes to live in the sun or something. And anyway, so I thought, maybe that's just me. That's just my weird connection to what Starboy does. But just again, that contributes to a whole, like I said, that mishmash of things that they're throwing in this movie. Right. But it wasn't. I don't know. It wasn't like he doesn't really quote unquote die, but only he could do what had to happen, which is to keep the sun together because of his gravity powers. And it was a nice way to, I don't know, make him whole by giving him something so grandiose as to keep the sun together, which ties him directly from the 20th century or 21st century. I'm so used to reading Legion comics where everything was in the 20th century. To the 30th, right? Because he keeps the solar system thriving, living. And I just thought that was a really nice end to his story.
Right.
And from death comes life. The other element that I like about this, we've mentioned Miss Martian a few times, but we haven't really talked about her. But we have an ending. So the end of the movie is we have this ending, Starboy sacrifice, and then we have the beginning of Miss Martian's role as a full-fledged member of the Justice League. And I thought that dichotomy that progression was kind of neat.
Yeah, you could see that there was evidence throughout the movie of how strong Starboy could really be, especially with the whole parking lot thing, and it collapses, and then it all sort of rises up again, and the Justice League are kind of looking at him like, whoa, I don't know if it necessarily landed with the exact meaning that they were trying to make it land with.
Yeah, I felt the same way.
If it was like a whole city or a whole block, maybe, but you have to, I assume you have to go by their faces that they're like, whoa, first of all, he's still alive. Secondly, that's pretty powerful for a guy whose mind is on the fritz. Mm-hmm. So when he started talking about it, though, at the end there, when he's like, Starboy, I thought, oh, right. I don't know if we've ever really seen it to that degree. This is a guy who can manipulate the mass, the almost, it's like one of those cosmic forces, the gravitational force, yes, or whatever you want to call it. Yeah. And he's internalizing it, not, instead of it being outside his body, he's internalizing it. And I love the visual of when he, dive bombs into the sun, all of the little solar flare things are going with him, and they're being attracted downwards and into the sun again. Mm-hmm. So that was kind of cool to extrapolate his powers that way into a different power set, different level.
Yeah, I like that as well. I've always thought it was weird that, yes, it's traditionally he's always been portrayed as someone who can increase the mass of someone, therefore basically just causing them to be trapped in place. But he's called Starboy, which, yes, there's a connection there, gravitational field, star mass, all that stuff. But yeah, they never really played with it, as far as I know, until this, and it totally makes sense. It really elevates what is really, a minor Legionnaire character. I'm sure there are fans of Starboy out there. I'm not really one of them, other than his costume. I love his costume, but it's just like, well, he can increase the mass of things and makes things heavy, right? Basically, that's what he does. But like I said, it really elevates his status in the greater superhero league, for lack of a better word. So I really like that aspect of it, and then him diving into the star and saving the solar system, saving the future. I mean, boy, what a really big ending for that character. I thought it was really cool what they did with that.
Yeah. I mean, if you go further with it, if you're going to use that whole star power, I mean, if he collapses the weight, his own, the mass or whatever, he should be able to create like a black hole within himself.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I guess that might even be what he sort of did at the end there, but there's a lot of potential now. Once I saw that scene, and I was like, oh, especially the second time. I didn't really get it the first time, but the second time it really hit home. I was like, oh, that's cool. Mm-hmm. So that I liked. I liked that a lot.
Yeah, I mean, considering what you just said, that makes him one of the more potentially powerful Legionnaires.
Yeah,
as opposed to like how I was minimizing him as he makes things heavy. I mean, there's a lot more to this guy's abilities now.
Yeah. I really have a couple other things here. It's kind of nice that, and we touched on this, I think, before. There's so many things that this movie is bringing back. Not only Justice League Unlimited, but we got some Batman animated characters. There's certainly some Green Lantern stuff. Young Justice, we talked about that. It's kind of like a nice tour through DC TV animation, all of those series, which was kind of cool. I don't know if this was a mistake, if it was on purpose, but Mono's symbol is very similar. The one on his chest, his emblem, is very similar to the Yellow Lantern of Fear.
I was thinking the same thing. Yeah, that was interesting.
So that again must be. I have to imagine that's just sort of like a coinky dink. I read a review, and I wish I could remember which one it was, but they had a really nice way of putting this episode and putting a lot of the mission of like some of the creators behind the scenes, where they're trying to. This was in relation to using Starboy and Jessica Cruz. They go out of their way to tell superhero stories based on unrepresented experiences and to characters whose stories that not everyone has seen yet. And you touched on that too, using different characters because it opens up the universe. It also allows them to tell different stories. So I really appreciated that.
Yeah.
And then I have to imagine they are putting a sequel in here because of all of the Green Lantern stuff they're talking about. So they talk about how John Stewart is off-world fighting Dominators on Rann. Hawkgirl went back to Thanagar. And if you go back to your Bronze Age World Finest comics from DC, there were often Thanagar-Rann wars.
Mm-hmm.
And then they made that into an actual comic in the early 2000s. So I thought, I wonder if they're trying to build some kind of thematic sequel by referencing that all these people are off-planet, or maybe they're going to do an invasion or something. I don't know.
That's what I was thinking, is some sort of riff on the invasion event that they did.
Yeah. That could be cool.
But yeah, building up the DC cosmic aspects of the DC universe, and the Legionnaires involved, and just again, like you said, expanding the possibilities of the DC universe, animated universe. So hopefully, this maybe is a going back to my complaint earlier. This movie is a harbinger for developing new content, not just adapting old content. So if that's the case, I will gladly set aside my issues with this movie, the particular issues I have with it, and embrace it as something that is promising something to come that I will enjoy more.
Yeah. And it was nice that you could get all of these episodes and movies on the DCU app, not to make it a commercial.
I know.
But, it was all there.
Not like you said, not to make it a commercial, but man, I have been enjoying that so much. Not just the fact that we can watch movies earlier than being able to buy them, like in this case, all that old content, all of the old Legion, not old, but that 2-season Legion of Superheroes cartoon. Where you cannot buy the second season. I've tried. It's not available on disc, as far as I knew, anyway. So that's there. You have the 2 episodes that we talked about from Superman, Justice League Unlimited. You have all those that you can watch. Not to mention all the comics, all of the Baxter run, the Volume 3 Legion of Superheroes, not all of them, as you pointed out before. The annuals aren't there, but the main numbered issues that we are talking about on the Legion Project, those are all there, right? Am I right, Peter?
Yep.
Yeah. So if you got that, and we talked about it before, you're spending $8 a month, and you read X number of comics, you've paid for it. And all you read are the Legion books that we are talking about in the Legion Project. It's paid for itself.
I did also watch, but I didn't recommend you to watch it because it doesn't mean anything. But did you ever see that Justice League? Is it Justice League Action Trapped in Time? I think it's called.
Yes.
Justice League Adventures. Yeah, because it has Karate Kid and Dawnstar in it.
Yes, that's right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I've seen that. Yeah,
it's aimed for a way younger audience.
Yeah.
It's okay. It's not great, and it doesn't connect to any of this. So,
well, I guess the only thing I wanted to that we haven't really talked about, and it's not having anything to do with the connections between the two, other than the fact that they're Legionnaires. One of the nice, this is something that does repeat in all of these. You do see other Legionnaires in some scenes in all three of these things that we're talking about. Mm-hmm. In the Superman episode, we see at least the ones that I could suss out. You know, I had to freeze frame it and try and identify certain characters, and there were others there that I could see, but I could not tell who they were. But you know, you get Ultra Boy, Phantom Girl, Dream Girl, Lightning Lad, Light Lass, Brainiac 5, Triplicate Girl, Bouncing Boy, and you mentioned already Kid Quantum and Andromeda, which was a surprise.
Right.
And then in the Justice League Unlimited, you get that Hall of Heroes that I mentioned before with Feral Lad, Saturn Girl, Cosmic Boy, Chameleon Boy. Others I couldn't tell. But then in a later scene, you see Ultra Boy again. He appears in all three of these in these scenes. Cosmic Boy, Saturn Girl, Colossal Boy, which was neat because it was his 1970s look, his uniform. I thought I like that uniform because it's weirdly busy and shouldn't work, but it does for me anyway. I would have thought they would have used something simpler. Is my point. Lightning Lad, Phantom Girl again. Wildfire appears in this. Block you mentioned before, Shadow Lass as well. Timberwolf, and some others. So I really like that they expand the Legionnaire roster in these little scenes. In the movie, you mentioned Tyrock already, which I thought was really cool. We saw Tyrock. Wildfire, Bouncing Boy, Mon-El, Dawnstar, Colossal Boy again, Chameleon Boy, Ultra Boy, as I said, Lightning Lad, Shadow Lass, Feral Lad, Phantom Girl, Timberwolf, Lightning Lass, and Night Girl. I saw Night Girl there. And this is in the Legion Museum scene. And then 5 others that I just couldn't tell who they were. So, I love how they're showing, hey, you're seeing X number of Legionnaires, but here is so many more that we could do something with. Now, really, they're just teasing us. I mean, that's all they're doing. But in my mind, in my headcanon, there are a bunch of movies they can make featuring these characters, and get away from the Justice League characters and simply just take a chance and make a Legion of Superheroes movie and see what you can do with that. Come on.
I'm pretty sure the one in the movie, the one character that had bumps on his arms is Arm Fall Off Boy. It's got to be. He's the only one that has bumps on his arms like that.
Oh my gosh.
That'd be great.
Did
you say we got some feedback?
Peter and I were actually going to talk about this in a previous recording session. So this has been a bit or a while ago, a bit of time ago, that I asked for this on Twitter. But I just put out on Twitter, hey, we're going to be talking about this movie. What does anybody have any thoughts, reactions, comments, whatever? And so I got a couple of those from people that I follow. I believe also follow me. But this is from Jack Yo76. Says, kind of critical here, it's another mediocre DC cartoon with boring/bland animation that takes way too many liberties with the source material. And I thought that was an interesting take on that, an interesting opinion. I replied to Jack that that's one of the things I liked about the movie was how they did play around with the source material, and I have criticized that a little bit here in this discussion, but ultimately, I do appreciate how they are trying to bring a bunch of different elements into this, And yeah, it's kind of a bit of a hodgepodge feeling about it because of the way they've done it. But at least they're trying something a little different. They're not just doing yet another Justice League story. And then the other one was from Twitter user Kara Quirrell. So this is a Kara, Supergirl, and Quirrell Docs Brainiac 5 fan who said that it wasn't a terrible movie, but it did not have enough to count as a Legion movie and in no way filled my need for a sequel to Justice League Unlimited Far From Home.
Is that it then?
Yeah, that's all I had.
Yeah. I mean, we don't really rate things, but I mean, in terms of like the other DC animated movies, I think there are definitely a lot better ones out there. In terms of a Justice League Unlimited episode, if you just wanted to look at it like that, again, there are better episodes. It's not the worst. It's like somewhere in the middle. It was, we watched it. I could watch it a second time. I don't know how many more rewatches I would do of it. But I think my hope is what they do after it, if anything.
Yeah.
I think it's important to bring in Jessica Cruz. I think that was important. But, where do we go from here?
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, it's definitely a potential jumping off point that, boy, I hope they don't disappoint us.
Yeah.
But I'm afraid they will because I'm cynical that way.
And these movies just take way too long to make, so it's not like I really want to sit around and go, what's next, because they just take too long to make. When they announce it, I'm like, great. All right, I'll see it when it comes out.
Exactly. I mean, I think they only release 2 a year.
Yeah.
And sometimes not even that. So
it was a nice diversion.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a nice way for us to get another Tales episode out about something, other than the comics.
Yeah. I hope we can do well. We have a lot more to do. We could talk about the Legion cartoon itself. The Legion appeared in what was it? Smallville, right?
Oh, right. Yeah.
One episode of Smallville, which I haven't seen actually. So maybe I can. Is Smallville on the DC Universe app?
I don't think it is.
Oh, okay. Well, that's too bad.
I didn't look, but okay. I don't think it is.
And I'm sure there are other things that I'm forgetting off the top of my head.
And I don't know how much more play they get in Supergirl because I've sort of dropped off on this season.
I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've only seen a few episodes of that where some of those Legionnaires appear. So.
Yeah. No. All right. Well, that means we're going to wrap up this episode, another Tales episode. By all means, if you want to send email, peter@thedailyrios.com or
longboxreview@gmail.com.
And we will be back with some regular Legion podcast episodes and in the future some more Tales episodes for your listening enjoyment. All right, Eric. Talk to you soon.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.